What's up, Spurs fans? Welcome to another episode of the Spurs Report. This is the NBA Draft Edition, as tonight the Spurs are going to be picking at number 20 of the 2026 NBA Draft. Weeks after the Spurs had a tough finals loss to the New York Knicks, but now our attention focuses towards the draft, and the Spurs have some draft picks that they can play with and see who they pick and join the Spurs. And they have the number 20th pick, 35th pick, 42nd pick, and 44th pick. But tonight is only the first round. Tomorrow will be the second round. So the Spurs only have one pick tonight at number 20. And in this episode, I'm going to be talking about the prospects I think the Spurs should target when they pick at number 20, albeit some of these prospects are most likely not going to be off the board anymore because they're very high quality players that had very productive college careers that teams will definitely covet. But let's get started as we are in draft season, like I said. So the first player I want to talk about that I want the Spurs to target, he's a national champion, Adai Mara from the national champion Michigan Wolverines. He started his career at UCLA for 2 years. He's originally from Spain. He had a very highly productive career in Europe before he came to the United States to play basketball. So, first of all, the thing that stands out on him is he has a massive 7'3" frame. He has excellent length, and he definitely used the length to his advantage. He had a breakout season at Michigan this past year, playing the 5 position, and he was just such a dominant defensive player. He was basically the Wembanyama on defense in college basketball. Teams would just go away from him. They would even challenge him because he had such great timing on blocks. He doesn't have the highest elevation, but he knows how to use angles and bait defenders into thinking that they can get the shot off, but he just blocks them in space. For a big guy, also, I'm really impressed with his feet. He can switch off of guards, point guards, shooting guards as well in the pick and roll, and he could stay in front of them because he just uses his length to his advantage, and he's really good at contesting a lot of shots. That's something that's very impressive about Ade Mara. He's extremely, coordinated, which and he has, and that shows because he has really soft hands. When he does on offense, he plays a lot of pick and roll action. He catches the ball, even some tough passes. He has great touch around the rim when he's not dunking. He's great at finishing with his right or left hand in against a lot of length, and he's also a really good passer too. Like, he can get the ball in the pick and roll, and then if the defense collapses on him, he can also pass it out to the open 3-point shooters, either the corner or just in general outside on the perimeter. Like I said, he's a very highly effective finisher, 67% field goal percentage, but he also has more than that. He can shoot a little bit. He has a nice stroke. He didn't have to do that a lot against at Michigan because Michigan had a lot of good other guards, but he can shoot outside the paint. He's a great lob threat. And then when he does get fouled, he draws a lot of fouls, obviously with the size. He's a great free throw shooter. He was dominant, the best player, even though he didn't win the Wooden Award. Cameron Boozer from Duke won it. I thought he was the best player in college basketball on both ends of the floor, and he was a big catalyst to why Michigan was able to win a national championship. Also, he has really good a good IQ on both ends of the floor. He's a smart basketball player. And even though he looks skinny in this picture, he can battle physicality pretty well. Like, he's good at using his elbows to create space without drawing offensive fouls, and also playing through physicality, playing through fouls. Like I said, finishing in the paint when there's a bunch of smaller defenders in the in that area. And also, for some big guys his size, you always think rebounding is something that they kind of struggle with, given that he's not the biggest guy in the world, like weight room wise, but he is tall. Well, Adai Mara is a great defensive rebounder, and he's a great offensive rebounder. He has a good motor. He plays hard, and he showed some flashes at UCLA his first 2 years, but he really took it up another level once he got into Michigan, and he was the Big Ten Defensive Player of the year. Of course, he was the most valuable player in the Final Four. Michigan did have the top defense in the country, but just in general, I think it's because of Adai Mara. And I know some people are saying mobility is his concern. I didn't see that. I thought he had decent lateral quickness, that he was able to stay in front of people. They didn't play a lot of drop coverage. He was actually on people and guarding him really well. But he's a player that can go anywhere from 9, I believe, to all the way up to 20 toward the Spurs pick. At 9 with the Dallas Mavericks, they need another guy to complement, a Derek Lively. Like they may be interested in him in general, but I don't think this prospect is going to fall to the San Antonio Spurs. But if they do, the Spurs should definitely get on this guy because he showed all year that he got better and better and better as the season went on, and that's all you want. And he got better in his college career. That's all you want for a player. So I think that, like I said, I don't think the Spurs, he's going to be there for the Spurs, but if he did, I would be very happy with this addition. He would be a great big man to either back up Wimby or complement Wimby, or Cornette in general. Let's move on to the next prospect, his teammate from Michigan, Morez Johnson. He started his career at Illinois. He played his freshman year at Illinois. Then his sophomore year last year was at Michigan. Again, as you know, they won the national championship. Morez Johnson is more, he can either play the 4 or the 5, power forward or center. And I like this. These are my two prospects, Adaimara and Morez Johnson, that I like the most, that I would be very, very thrilled that the Spurs were able to draft either of those guys. He's not as big as Mara, but he's like with height wise, but he's more physically built than Adaimara is. He's 6'9", 250 pounds. He's actually like a player that can switch off of ball screens. He has a little bit more foot quickness than Adaimara does. He could stay with point guards. He could stay with guards. And he's also has pretty good hands as well. But he also can shot block, even though he's not like the biggest guy with height-wise, 6'9". I like it the most that he's a great defensive player, particularly by his weak side blocking. He's really good at coming up the weak side and anticipating and blocking shots, or not even blocking shots, but changing shots like Adaimara does. He's also a great rebounder. He has a 7'3" wingspan, so he's great at contesting without fouling and rebounding at a high level. In my opinion, this year on offense, he really improved his game from his freshman year at Michigan. He plays with a lot of energy. He plays with a lot of physical toughness. Like I said, he's a well-built player. He's great at getting the ball inside, finishing in the paint, backing players down. He has a couple of hook shots that he likes to go to as well. He has a good stroke. He didn't show a lot of that shooting ability, but he is a good stroke that eventually can build into a good shooter. But also, he's a player that can finish through contact and play above the rim. Like he has some athleticism, especially on both ends of the floor. And I just like the passion that he plays with. He wears his passion on his sleeve. You could tell he loves to play the game of basketball. He enjoys this opportunity. And he was one of the big reasons that Michigan was able to win the national championship, because they did something that a lot of teams in college basketball didn't do. So Adaimara was their 5, Morez Johnson is their 4. Yaxel Lindenberg, another player that Spurs potentially could draft, but maybe not. He played his 4 throughout his college career, but Michigan slotted him to the 3, and he's an older player. But so those 3 guys were your front line, and it just shows you why Michigan was one of the best defensive teams in the entire country. So Yaxel Lindenberg, I know I'm going to go over 4 players today that the Spurs, I think they could draft. The 5th player I would say would probably be Yaxel Lindenberg. Like I said, is an older player, but he had a really good season, transferring in to Michigan from UAB. Again, Morez Johnson also had a really huge season for Michigan. He had a big tournament run. I really like it, and I think he's most likely not going to be a 5 at the NBA because like I said, he's 6'9", but he can be a really good 4, and eventually can be a stretch 4, as well. But one thing that he does have to work on at times is he does have some turnovers. He doesn't have as good hands as Adaimara. Sometimes when he gets the ball in the paint, he's fighting defenders. He tries to do too much and he loses the ball, or he brings the ball. He doesn't keep the ball high. He brings the ball down low, which those pesky defenders can really swipe at the ball, and especially when he's in traffic situations. So he needs to work on that a little bit and being a little bit more decisive sometimes about when to shoot and when to use up his size. But he doesn't have a lot of creation on the face-ups, but he's more like of backing you down and just finishing with a hook shot or finishing with a dunk. He doesn't really have a mid-range shot right now. I think he eventually can develop that, but that's something that he has some question marks as well. But he's still a young player. Like I said, he just finished his sophomore year. He has a lot of room to grow, a lot of room to get better. He still has a lot of a high ceiling, in my opinion. He's a versatile defensive first front court player. That's something that the Spurs are definitely going to need, and he could carve out to be a very valuable role player. This guy will most likely come off the bench. So I'm excited, if the Spurs were able to get him, because I think he had a really good year at Michigan. And he has some untapped potential that he can really show, given the opportunity to play, at the next level. But again, this is a prospect I'm not entirely sure that there's going to be available at number 20 with the Spurs, but you never know. And anything can happen in the NBA draft. All these teams have these players slotted at different sections of their draft board. So we'll see what happens tonight. The third player I want to talk about. This is the player that I actually had to go back and watch the highlights of, because I didn't watch a lot of Santa Clara games, even though they had a pretty good year this year. They made the tournament, etc. But Alan Graves from Santa Clara. So he redshirted his freshman year. He played last year as a redshirt freshman, basically a sophomore. He's like Morris Johnson. He's a 6'8", 6'9" Think, I've heard the comparisons with, think of a Boris Diaw type of player, like a guy that can, he was a former point guard, but he who hit a really late growth spurt, but he still has those point guard skills, something that Morez Johnson or Ade Mara do not have. He has really good ball skills, uncommon for his size. Like, he can really bring the ball up court. He's a pretty good passer and initiating the offense. He doesn't turn the ball over a lot, and he's pretty efficient, which is something like you like to see. His great playmaking ability. He really operates effectively out of the high post. That's where Santa Clara like to keep him. And then the short roll, they use him in a lot of pick and roll to really keep the ball movement going, and enhance their offense, which is something that they did a really good job. He's a really high efficient scorer, shooting 51% from the field. He doesn't take bad shots, which is something that you like to see. He's a really high IQ player. He always makes the right plays on both sides of the floor, and he has great versatility on both sides of the floor. He's a great defender. He doesn't block a lot of shots, but he can affect a lot of shots and play really good defense and contest. But as well as on offense, he can spot up, so with mid-range shots, he can stretch the floor a little bit. But he also has a pretty, good wingspan, something that I really like about him. He also rebounds well for his position. He's a tough physical player that's not afraid to play through contact. He plays within a team concept, which is something that you really like to see, because that's something that the Spurs really preach. He can fit in like a glove on any system and he's a selfless team first guy, which is something that's really important with prospects coming, in to the NBA. He has some power forward upside, because like I said, he's probably going to play the 4. Maybe he can play a little bit of the 3, but most of his time is going to be at the 4. Some weaknesses from him that he did play at Santa Clara, which is at the West Coast Conference. It's not at the highest level. But he also did come off the bench, which is something like you think he would start. I don't think that's that big of a knock on him, but it's just something to watch out for. He didn't have a lot of exposure against elite competition. Like, he played all right against when they played Gonzaga, the big opponent that the powerhouse of the West Coast Conference. He played all right in both meetings against Gonzaga. Nothing too spectacular, but he didn't play poorly. He's not really an explosive athlete, but I think with the Spurs team, they don't really look at those players that need to be explosive athletes, because we have plenty of those guys on the team. You just need have a guy that fits in with your team concept and can do the dirty work, which is something Alan Graves can definitely do. His body still needs a little toning. I think he needs to add a little bit more strength, which Spurs strength and conditioning team is one of the best in the NBA. He definitely can do that. Unlike Mara and Morris Johnson, his free throw shooting is at basically 74%. Needs a little bit room for improvement, because if he plays in the paint, he's definitely going to get fouled a lot. He has some defensive tools that are promising as well, that he can really continue to grow as he gets to the NBA. But he's an intriguing long-term prospect who's a versatile, efficient player, has a great feel for the game. Like I said, he has a really high basketball IQ. He shoots better than Draymond Green did at this position when Draymond Green came into the draft, which is something that he could show. But also having the inside game as well, good touch around the basket, can get fouled. So This is a player that I wouldn't be surprised if he's there at number 20 compared to Morez Johnson and Ademara. So we'll see what happens, with that. But the Allen Graves is something the Spurs like to find those prospects that come from a little bit more smaller schools that have really had good season that can make them name for themselves at the next level. So this is a guy to definitely watch out for. All right, the next guy, Chris Sanak from Houston. First of all, this guy is most intriguing to me because if you can play under Kelvin Sampson, you can play for anybody in the NBA and you could take hard coaching. Playing for Kelvin Sampson is not the easiest. He doesn't play a lot of freshmen all the time, but he did play a lot of give Chris Sanak a lot of minutes. And he had a really good year at Houston. He got challenged because at high school he was a really highly sought after recruit, top 5 in the country. But the knock on him was his motor needed some work, and he didn't always play hard. Well, he went to college. He got challenged by Kelvin Sampson. He wanted to be coach. He wanted to get better. And boy, do I say that really paid off for Chris Sanak, and he played himself into a first round pick because at the beginning of the year, he was not a first round pick. But the more he played in the season, he was able to play himself into first round contention. And that's definitely where he's going to go. This is a player I could see the Spurs drafting at number 20. That's still because he is a player that he is bouncy. He's 6'11 big man. He has a blend of size, fluidity, upside, athleticism, has an excellent frame, a massive wingspan. He needs to continue to add weight, but again, he just played his freshman year at Houston. He's a 19, 20-year-old kid, but he has a lot of long-term upside. I really liked how hard he would run the floor. Houston did not run a lot of offense to him. They ran it through Kingston, Fleming, etc. But would run his tail off down the floor, and he would get a lot of easy transition buckets, just beating everybody down the floor and wanting it more than the defense. That's what's so impressive about Chris Sanak. He also has a great motor. Like I said, something that really got improved since his high school days. He's a great rebounder, offensive rebounder, defensive rebounder. In my opinion, he has really good touch around the rim. He's a lob threat. He's a putback finisher. He was a productive rebounder, averaging 8 rebounds, and he just played just 25 minutes a game. College game plays 40 minutes, but he played 25 minutes a game with strong instincts. He would constantly attack the glass, even if he doesn't get the rebound. He would be there trying to get the rebound. He played with toughness. He played with physicality. He's also a team first player, coming off the bench at times. He showed flashes of a modern skill set, including a face up ability, a jab step pull up, perimeter shooting touch around the rim. He made a couple of threes. But I think this is a guy that is going to continue to get better and better. If he's in the right system, he can really become a good shooter and really develop his game. He develops some flashes of being a good passer. He didn't always do it all the time because, like I said, he didn't get always a lot of touches. So sometimes he would focus on scoring, and the defense knew that at times. But at times, he would also do a really good job of kicking it out to players on the perimeter and for open shots. He's very disciplined, coming from Kelvin Sampson. He got coach hard, and he's a guy that plays with physicality and can really make a big impact on a team as it continues to get more minutes in the NBA. Some weaknesses are that he's still a raw prospect. He'll require more time than the other 3 prospects that I showed a little bit earlier. His offensive skills, while they're good, they still need some polishing. He averages 9 points a game, but he struggled with efficiency and consistency at times, shooting 48% from the field, 33% from three, 62% from the free throw line. Needs some work because you cannot be like a Mitchell Robinson player that becomes a free throw liability that other teams will hack you and slow the offense down. In my opinion, right now, he doesn't have a go-to reliable offensive move, but he's still young. He still has a chance to really improve, his skills, especially in the half court a little bit, but he does show some advanced footwork, counters, and touch around the basket to score because players were defending him in a variety of ways, and he showed a lot of creativity to get some baskets on some really good players. The Big 12 was the best league in the country last year, and he was able to score on some really good defenders as the season continued to go on. So he is definitely a first round pick. He's a player that I can see, like I said, the Spurs, drafting there at number 20. Kelvin Sampson has a Spurs connection. Kelvin Sampson is one of the best coaches in college basketball. He's got coach right. He has the right attitude, mental mindset. So this is a guy that I can definitely look to see if the Spurs can snag and what kind of career that he has with the Spurs. And he would have some. The question for the Spurs is, do you need a four that, you want to contribute a little bit more, or can you wait on a guy like Chris Sanak to develop a little bit? In my opinion, I think you need a guy that can contribute a little faster, like a Morris Johnson, Ade Mara, and Allen and Graves, compared to waiting for, a guy in a couple of years for Chris Sanak to really be able to make a big impact on your team. But when you're drafting in towards the late of the first round, like the Spurs are at number 20, sometimes you have to take your chances on these high upside players that could really turn into something. So I talked about it a little bit earlier. My fifth guy that I could see the Spurs taking a chance on and drafting at number 20 is Yaxel Lindenberg, who also was part of Michigan. That Michigan team, they were loaded. They could have 3 first-round picks on that team. But he played more of a 3, despite him having experience playing as a 4 at UAB before he did transfer to Michigan. He's an older prospect. He's 23 years old, almost 24 actually, as I'm looking at it right here. But he's a unique modern front court prospect. He has a lot of production in his college career, versatility. He did measure at 6 and 8.5, which is pretty good. 7'4" wingspan, so that could kind of negate some of his concerns about his age, being almost 24 years old. He's a little bit of an undersized traditional big. If he can't really, it'll be tough for him to play the 4, even though he showed that at a lower level. But most of his production at the Big Ten came at the 3, so I think that's what he would have to play. But he can score at all 3 levels. He can get to the basket. He can score in the mid-range. He can score from 3. He can create his own shot off the dribble. He can play off the ball as needed, because Michigan, had some ball handlers that were that they would feature, and then they would pass it to him, and then he would be able to create his own offense. In my opinion, he took a major leap as a perimeter scorer. Converted, he shot 37% from 3, more of a high volume. He double attempts from which had more than double attempts from his previous season. He has great floor spacing ability. He's a great free throw shooter at 83%. Like I said, he's a 3-level scorer. He's a good rebounder. He's a physical, tough, rugged player that will do whatever it takes for the team to win. Fits within the team concept. He's a selfless player. He has a high basketball IQ, great awareness for the game. He doesn't rush or take a lot of bad shots or make a lot of bad plays. He plays within the offense. There may not be much developmental upside with him despite his age, but he's a player that can plug and play like a Jaime Jaquez type of player, that is an older prospect that can come in and be in your lineup, or be in the rotation, immediately, and make a big impact for your team as you're competing for a championship like the Spurs would want. Some of the weaknesses that he have, like I said, he's almost 24 years old. He's still a little bit relatively new to the game. He's only played organized basketball for about 5 years, which I found very interesting when I was reading up on him. He showed occasional lapses in inconsistency a little bit. He needs to work on that. His foot speed is not the best. He can improve that a little bit. His quickness, he might get picked on a little bit in the NBA on the defensive side of the ball. He's very left-hand dominant, which can make his drives and finishes be more predictable against very disciplined defenders. He needs to, because if the team takes away his left hand, does he have a counter move? That's the question for him. I think he can be a go-to scorer if needed upon, if other players are kind of out of the lineup. He showed me some shot creation ability that I think that can really translate to the next level. But, he's one of the fastest risers in the 2026 draft. Like I said, he was a former JUCO prospect, went to UAB, and now, and then finished his career at Michigan. He does have a good size, length. He's not the most athletic player, but he's a very polished player. I think he's the most polished player at this NBA draft. And he would go most likely in the 10 to 20 range. And he would be a plug and play rotational player for the Spurs that will make great plays, that has the experience of playing in college basketball and that will take coaching the right way and play within a team concept and play within an offense. So that's the last guy I wanted to talk about. We'll see whether the Spurs have the opportunity to draft either of these five guys. I will be back tomorrow breaking down what happened with the Spurs with their first round pick and also previewing the second round because the Spurs are going to have a very busy second round Wednesday evening. They have the 35th pick, 42nd pick, and 44th pick. So thank you so much for watching this NBA draft edition of the Spurs Report. This is your host, Shiva Patel. I'll see you again tomorrow, signing off.